Do you find Jesus enviable? Boy, for myself, if I didn't, I wouldn't be following him. I couldn't be following him. And I don't think you could either. I think anyone that doesn't envy Jesus, that doesn't want the quality of life that he had here in this life, doesn't love him. Begone from me, I do not know you. I think they'll hear from him with tears in his eyes. Those that don't envy his quality of life. And just awakening this morning was I given the insight. What was enviable about him, James? Why was his life so enviable? Why is his way so enviable? And a verse began to unpack for me that never has unpacked before. If you love those who love you, what thanks have ye? And in that I find the answer to what I have experienced since my earliest years, but I didn't understand until just this morning. Why did I always find his the most enviable life here on earth, the way it felt to him? If you love those who love you, what thanks have ye, James? If you want my enviable life, James, nurture the love within you to the level that I did. Agape, I think it's called in the Greek. Unconditional love. And I think more clearly, unconditional loving. That is action verb. That's where my joy came from. If James here were asked, did you like that your parents loved you? Did that feel good to you? Was that a positive experience? Was that gratifying for you? And the answer is yes. Particularly my dad, he knew how to love. Is that the best loving that you experienced, James? No, it wasn't. What was the next best, James? Well, it was loving the woman that I married. Eros, James? Eros was more intense, but it wasn't better than the love that I received from my parents and that I had from my parents. Phileo, I think it's called in the Greek, family love. Eros was more intense. It wasn't better. But I suppose it was Eros and Phileo to the woman I married. And is that the best for you, James? Well, certainly alongside of it was love for my 2 biological offspring. Boy, that was really something. Was that Eros, James? No, it certainly wasn't. Was it just Phileo, James? I don't know. It was so intense to have the opportunity to have responsibility for those young lives. Well, so is all this the best for you, James? I don't know if it's the best, but it isn't a complete list. What completes the list, James? In industry, I realized that I loved my coworkers. And I couldn't stand to see situations where in large groups they were going to lose their jobs, lose their employment, which means losing everything material. And it drove me to, it's part of what drove me to working 3 times harder than anyone, I was told, doing more work than any 3 people, to try and be a catalyst that people would keep their jobs, that divisions or companies would thrive rather than close. And then it took a larger turn when I learned that the 1,200 students in the blighted elementary school I had placed myself in as a school counselor intern were my children. Agape. And it's grown from there to especially the neediest, but not only the neediest, around the globe and those who will be born. What was enviable about Jesus? That he mastered or caused himself to be mastered by our God-given capacity for agape, which of course I now the second realize is God's love. Agape is God's love, not loving God. The love that God has for us. And he put that capacity within us if we would only develop it. If you love those who love you, what thanks have ye? Jesus said. What was he saying? If you haven't developed your capacity for agape, particularly as an adult, you've missed the good stuff. You've missed God's love. You are not partaking of you are not a conduit for God's loving, his care, his ongoing care, his ongoing fighting for us by sending the rain and the sun every day. Agape is the closest we get to God. And if we have chosen not to develop that capacity as adults, not to be of that capacity as adults, not to surrender to that capacity as adults, we are not following Jesus. We don't love Jesus in the way he would want, which is agape. Loving him for him, not for what he does for us, not for how he makes us feel, but for him. And as you do unto the least of these, you do unto me, also comes to mind. If you think you love someone, and they call you on the phone and say, boy, you know what? The person that I love as much or more than anyone is in terrible trouble, and I can't help them. But you can. They're in your town. Will you please go do thus and so? If you truly love the person on the phone with you that just gave you that message, because you love them, you're going to go take care of their loved one. If you don't really love them, you're not going to go. Didn't just say that you'd be bad or that person would be bad, but they wouldn't really love them. As you do unto the least of these, you do unto me. By all measure, by all example, Jesus loved the least of these that still had enough life in them to be saved. He may have loved all of us, but the intensity of his love was for them. And if we haven't developed in ourselves, if we don't develop in ourselves to love them, we don't love Jesus. Let's fix that. And if you think I've got it wrong, tell me in the comments. Tell me explicitly why you think I'm wrong in light of what I've just said and in light of what Jesus said and showed. Don't quote me elsewhere in the Bible. Talk to me about him in Matthew, Luke, and Mark, and how, with that in mind, I'm wrong.